All right. Well, you know what? Let's get out of here.
Okay, bye.
So, nice try, sir.
This is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
Oh, hold on.
What?
Sorry, no Steve today, so
that's right.
So I had to improvise. My name is Rob Minot. Joining me today, Mr. Ryan Fleury,
That's me.
and no Steve Barclay.
Nope.
So no cowbell either.
Well, you just rang the cowbell. So.
Well, I did, but I had to run over to his chair to do it. Steve is out at some shows this week, so he is not here. So it's just two of us.
Again. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, look at you yawning.
I'm tired.
Yeah, you had a 4-day weekend.
I know, but yesterday was awful.
What is it? The change in weather?
No, I just didn't sleep well, and it was just kind of a crabby day, and just kind of like, ugh.
You had a crabby day off? You had a Monday off and you were crabby?
I was.
That was like a waste of a Monday. You could have worked if you wanted to be crabby. You should have just told Steve, yeah, you know what, I decided I'm
grumpy today, so I'm going to work.
I'm in a crap mood anyways. So I'm not going to enjoy myself. I'll just work.
Our listener audience, I'm not always crabby. Despite what Rob feels.
It's true. Breaks into the tequila.
Although you bastard, you went to Chili Pepper House on Friday.
Oh, yeah. It was good, too.
Yeah, you suck.
It was good.
I bet.
It's okay, but it was, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had that on Friday, and then I ended up having Indian food on Saturday, and Sunday it was a disaster. It's just, yeah, not good. Not a good situation. So don't do that, people. Hey, Ryan,
yes.
What are we doing today?
Today we are talking with Nancy Thorogood, who is a research associate at the Rick Hansen Institute.
Yeah, this will be cool. This will be really cool. So the Rick Hansen Institute is also very different from the Rick Hansen Foundation, who, of course, we talked to, and we talked to the man himself, not to brag, but we did. So this is more the research arm into spinal cord injury research and rehabilitation. And I think they even dabble a bit in sort of aftercare and assistive technology a bit too. So
research.
Yes. Cool. So we're excited about having Nancy on a little bit later. But first, you know what I want to talk about, Ryan?
What do you want to talk about?
And this will please you to no end, I'm sure. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about Apple.
Apple? Like the company Apple or the fruit apple?
You know the kind of apple that...
Okay, listening audience, sit down. You're in for a ride.
But no, they had a big event yesterday, and you watched it. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about the stuff that they announced, and if any of it ties to accessibility at all.
Alrighty.
There was a big Apple event yesterday. They announced. Will you tell us what they announced, Ryan?
They announced a bunch of services. So their new Apple News Plus, I think it was called. It's their news app, but they are also adding up to over 300 different magazines that you can now subscribe to as well. And your one subscription can actually be shared amongst family, so not everybody has to have their own subscription. So, of course, Apple talked about their design and their...
Okay, well, can I just pause right there?
Sure.
Who the hell subscribes to a digital magazine?
Probably lots of people.
Really? I would never do that. If I wanted to subscribe to a magazine, I would subscribe to a physical copy of it, maybe, like so that I could have it on the coffee table or whatever. Maybe I'm a dinosaur, but I mean, because I don't really...
if you're in the grocery store aisle, do you see a copy of Rolling Stone and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy that, and you take it home?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of why I think the subscription model is probably not going to work for magazines, because people see an article or whoever's on the cover and like, oh, that looks interesting. Maybe I'll pick that one up.
That's exactly. I think what they're forgetting is that magazines have always been about, the presentation, the look of the magazine, like the physical, like the pictures, like it's.
Oh, that's all
it's
still
to
in
go.
here.
But it's to go on a coffee table, like to have a digital. It's like having a digital painting.
It's no different than an ebook.
It's technically it is, but I think that and who knows, maybe I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm out of the loop on this. If other people think differently, by all means, email us at cowbell@atbanter.com and say, hey, Rob was wrong. But my feeling is that people aren't interested in reading magazines digitally.
I might be surprised. I don't know.
Because pictures, like the layout of a magazine, there's an artistry to laying out a magazine that you don't get from, say, an ebook.
Right.
So I think it's a very different animal, and I don't know, like online magazine service just does not excite me. Now maybe newspapers, okay, that I could sort of get behind. I could understand that.
And they did talk about, I think, a couple, like the Wall Street Journal is coming, or is there now. The app actually got released late yesterday or the iOS update that supports the new News Plus app got released yesterday. So, I haven't dug into it yet. I might, take a look at a magazine and see how accessible it is or was.
Right. Which is a whole different conversation.
Well, it is. And that's kind of the one thing that stood out to me yesterday is the Apple event. Every time they played a video on the screen, it was not described.
Yeah.
So they would have these videos playing of people playing games or whatever they were showing, and Apple touts accessibility all the time. None of that was audio described.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think the word accessibility came up once in terms of all these new services, and you would think that they could at least add a sentence to, say, this online, magazine subscription service that we were talking about, and say, and by the way, everything will be accessible.
Yeah, and that's why I want to take a look at it.
So,
and I'm sure Apple Viz will be looking at it. I'm sure others as well will be reporting on it and commenting on it.
People just don't digest news in the same way as they used to in terms of newspapers.
Right.
And, and again, who knows? Maybe I'm just speaking for myself. Maybe I'm a dinosaur, but I don't know what the last time I've read a newspaper was.
Right.
I have my news sources that I get from my phone, and that's how I get the news.
Exactly.
And so I think a lot of people are like that. So
we want a quick glance, right? Like we're not going to sit down and, I used to love reading the newspaper when I had sight. But no, now that I don't, it's just a quick glance at my news app, see the headlines, the local news, and away I go.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that service is. But okay,
So they also announced a streaming service, which to me was really lackluster. Sesame Street characters, a couple of them showed up. They're going to have a show called Helpsters, again for kids. Oprah was the final guest, and Oprah is having an Oprah-style show where she talks to change makers around the world. Of course, their own original content. They have a movie that's being filmed here called C that is original content that is going to be released on their own service later this fall. As well as, I think the one thing that was really kind of exciting, probably for more people in the U.S. than us here in Canada, is that they're having something called channels. So instead of having a Hulu app and a CBS Now app and a this app and a that app, it all gets amalgamated into your channels. So let's just say you want to look for, and it remembers the shows you like. So let's say you like, I don't know, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It just finds that from all the services, the Amazon Prime, whatever services are out there, it finds that, and you add that to your favorites or to your channel. So you don't need apps anymore.
Does this not strike you as it's a little as kind of funny. It's like they've discovered TV again. It's like we've gone all the way full around. It's like, hey, we discovered this new thing called channels. I was like, oh wow,
yep,
thanks.
But it's gonna, and it went deeper than.
No,
than
I know, I get it, I
right?
get it. I'm being a bit flippant,
but you can have the Apple TV app coming to your smart TV as well. So the TV app will be on your device, whether it's your Apple TV or your smart TV, and you will have your channels, right? So you don't have to get into the Amazon Instant Video app. You don't have to get into the Roku app. You don't have to get into the CBS app. Your shows just show up. It was really slick. But again, a lot of this content is stuff I think that we don't have access to yet. We don't have access to all these subscription services like CBS Now. Our content is still limited on Amazon Instant Video. Hulu we don't have in Canada yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once they launch it later this fall, it'll be interesting to see how people accept it. They also didn't announce the pricing yet.
Well, now, okay, but so as somebody, because you have an Apple TV, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you're the demographic that this should interest. Are you excited about this? Is this really just for people who have already bought into sort of Apple TV?
I like the aspect of not having to skip around to individual apps all the time. Like I've got a CBC app, I've got the Amazon Instant Video app, I've got the Netflix app, I've got all these apps on my Apple TV.
Uh-huh.
I could just go into the TV app, look for the show that I want and add that show, right? I don't have to go into the Amazon Instant Video app and then find the show, find out it's not there. Okay, so what app has this show, or what source can I get this from? The Apple TV app will do all that for you.
Right.
So it's really going to streamline the service. But again, I think time will tell as to how efficiently it actually works. And the amount of content that, we're going to have.
Now, to bring this conversation back around to accessibility, though, how accessible is the Apple TV?
Very.
So that it has that going for it. So this potentially could be a really...
And again, you're not necessarily going to have an Apple TV. The Apple TV app is coming to smart TVs.
Oh, okay.
So when you buy your smart TV, you can just install the TV app instead of the Amazon app, the Roku app, the Hulu app.
I see.
And do everything from within that app. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the price point's going to be and the services that are available at launch. So
right.
We'll see.
All right. And what else did they...
Well, Apple is now offering a titanium credit card. They have their own not their own financial service. They are working with Goldman Sachs in the U.S. and part of their Apple Pay. As you use your Apple Pay credit card, you get money back. What? So the card has no fees, has no expiry date, has no CVV number on it, has no credit card number on it. It works as part of your Apple Pay, and I forget what the amounts are, but I think if you're buying something from the Apple Store, you get 3% back. If you're buying something from, iTunes, I think you get 1% cash back. It's instant cash back. I highly recommend people going and watching the event because it got a lot more detailed than how I'm explaining that it works. Again, for people who are Apple fanboys in the Apple ecosystem, this may be great. For me here in Canada, not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I don't know.
Again, it's just another service that they're offering. Apple is recognizing they're not making money on hardware anymore. They have to do more services. That's where the money is.
You bring it's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, you're probably
they've got a
right.
billion iOS devices out there already. That market's saturated.
Yeah, and people aren't buying a new iPhone every year anymore.
No.
Like those days are just gone.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
services are.
Yeah, you're probably
where
right. You're probably right.
Yep.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Nothing really exciting.
It really wasn't
accessibility-wise, but
there was nothing that I saw. Well, and a new gaming service as well.
But I was thinking about this on the way over, and I was like, I don't know. Are we giving Apple like just a bad time for no reason? Because, I mean, these guys were so ahead of everybody else in terms of accessibility.
They were ahead.
But
They were ahead.
I don't know. Maybe, what else can they do?
Well, that's just it. And that's why they're launching services, more and more services, because I can't say they've done all they can with regards to accessibility. Apple is still probably the most secure platform. They don't share, well, they say they don't share any of your information. The stuff stays on your device. But if you look at Android, from what I'm hearing on the new Android Pixels, the gestures are becoming more iOS-like.
Okay.
So, I think Android is taking a page from iOS because look what iOS has done. The market gravitated to iOS.
Yeah.
And, there's going to be a more closer merging of the technologies or the way they interact, that it's not going to matter what device you're on. We're getting to that point now where you jump into this one service or one subscription, it's available on all your devices, right?
Well, I think maybe what's happening, and the big difference between Google and Apple has been historically, is that Google's Google will just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. They'll just develop anything. And so they're working on so much stuff, whereas Apple has been, pretty focused on hardware, new phones, accessibility in the past.
Yep.
And so, and like you said, I think now that sales are reflecting that hardware isn't where their bread is buttered anymore. I think you're right. They have to sort of take more of Google's approach and just, saying, we just got to try some different stuff. Let's try a bunch of stuff. And if some of it doesn't work, whatever, but if something sticks, great. So maybe that's what we're seeing, the beginning of that.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And it's not bad. Apple is the most wealthy company in the world now, the most valuable company in the world. So they've got deep enough pockets that they can, try some stuff finally, not just keep stuff in the labs and throw it out there and see what works.
Oh my God. You're so funny.
Why?
I challenge all our listeners, go back about, 25 episodes.
Why?
And listen to Ryan talk about Apple then, before he got an iPhone again, and listen to him now. Very different. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe that episode, but I've had
Mr.
I've had two
now.
Apple TV. No, I've had two Apple TVs in my house for like over 5-6 years. And I use them quite regularly. That's what I use for Netflix, Amazon Instant Video.
I'm just saying. Listen, I don't blame you.
I've got a Google Home. I've got Amazon Echo. I'm not invested into any ecosystem.
I know.
Listen,
I'm not. You're getting a little defensive.
That's right. Hear that, Allie? I'm on your side.
Just saying. I hear you say the word Apple and all these glowing, very positive adjectives.
To be really honest, though, going back to an iPhone, is so much nicer.
Oh, here we go.
Than the problems I had with my Android device. That's all I'm going to say.
Plug your ears, Google. Plug your ears. You've lost them.
Yep.
Now, look, as long as they keep making these platforms accessible and then keep improving.
Exactly.
We have choice. It's all good.
Yep.
Apple. I love Apple. Love Google. Just keep developing cool stuff. Keep doing what you're doing in terms of accessibility. You could do it a little faster if you wanted. Like, let's get Lookout going, people. But it's all good. We can all get along, especially these days. We don't need to fight in the tech sector. We got enough fighting going on politically.
Yep.
So we got enough problems. Hey Steve, why don't you tell the fine folks about Canadian Assistive Technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology is a Canadian-based distributor of, guess what? Assistive technology.
I would not have guessed that.
Really? Oh, I got to work something better into the name then. And we do all kinds of low vision and blindness aids, as well as all kinds of physical access aids and accessible furniture. You name it. Visit our website at www.canastech.com.
Rick, let me ask you about this. Chaos Technical Services.
Chaos Technical Services.
Don't sound so excited about it. Woo! Speaking of repairs,
We are the sister company to CanAs Tech. We do the repairs on low vision devices, reading machines, for libraries, braille printers, and pretty well anything in between. We can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Joining us now is Nancy Thorogood, a research associate at the Rick Hansen Institute. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
so why don't we start out with telling us a little bit about the foundation itself and what kind of work you guys are currently doing there.
So the Institute is also a legacy of the Rick Hansen Man in Motion Tour. It was officially formed in 2009 from investment from the federal government of Canada as well as from the Rick Hansen Foundation. So today we say that RHI focuses on, the Institute, we call it RHI for Rick Hansen Institute, that we focus on spinal cord injury research, innovation, and care, while the foundation focuses more on accessibility and inclusion for people of all disabilities.
Right.
So we have separate governance. We each have our own CEO as well as board of directors. We're a not-for-profit organization, and we really try and drive this innovation in research and care with spinal cord injury. We're located at the Blesson Spinal Cord Center in Vancouver at the Vancouver General Hospital campus.
Okay.
It's kind of a unique building if you haven't been here. If you're around VGH, I would highly suggest to check it out. We have here within the building, there's an outpatient spine clinic with Vancouver Coastal Health, so seeing patients there. As well, there's a bunch of UBC research labs taking up a couple floors. There's an accessible gym as well as an accessible woodworking shop. And we have a great kind of entry auditorium with a wheelchair ramp that goes around the entirety of the building up to the third floor.
Wow.
So it's kind of cool if you haven't seen it yet. A lot of people do workouts in their wheelchairs up the ramps. Kids that come to visit love to run up the ramp. So.
Or race down the ramp.
But yeah, spinal cord injury in general is defined as any damage to the spinal cord that causes changes in its normal function. So the spinal cord is an extension of the nervous system that goes down from the brain down your back, and it's covered and protected by what we commonly refer to as the spine, or the bony portion of the spine, the vertebrae, protecting that spinal cord. So injury usually results in loss of motor or muscle function, loss of sensation below the level of injury. So people commonly refer to as paralysis, numbness, or weakness. And there's a lot of secondary complications associated with a spinal cord injury, like muscle atrophy, pressure ulcers, infection. Depending on where within the level of the spinal cord injury, you can get respiratory complications and things like that, which I think people commonly associate with. And like I said, injury can be at any level of the spine, from the cervical to the thoracic to the lumbar. And depending on where the injury occurs, there's varying outcomes. So it's not just one, say, disease or injury. There's a variety of injuries, and there's a whole complicated way of looking at it and defining it and grouping certain injuries together.
Right, because I mean there are injuries that, or I mean the different injuries can result in different outcomes. So you could have a spinal cord injury and the result could be maybe something like, ongoing chronic pain as opposed to out and out paralysis. Am I correct?
Yes, definitely. So there is a common international standard for classification. It's called the INSCI. And so a lot of people refer to themselves by their level of injury. So they'll say they're cervical or thoracic or lumbar. And then they'll say they're ASIA or AIS is commonly said that they're A, B, C, or D. So A going from a complete injury with loss of function below the level, and B, C, and D are varying levels of function below the injury.
Right.
So yeah, definitely you can get somebody with a spinal cord injury that's walking, and you would never know. Visually, you'd never know, but they may have problems with their bladder or bowel, or maybe even just within their foot,
Right.
Versus somebody who's in a wheelchair who has use of their arms and can actually wheel themselves, versus somebody that's in a motorized chair or even somebody on a ventilator.
Now, does that make it challenging for the Institute, like in the sense that there's sort of an education portion of the work that you do, trying to make people understand all the different gradients?
Yeah, definitely. And we don't do a whole lot of community education per se. We do fund some work within that, but we do have this, like I mentioned, the international standard. So it's the International Standard for Neurological Classification of Spinal Cord Injury. So we commonly use that mostly for research purposes, as well as people would use it in clinical care, but we use it to group certain injuries together, and then we look at those specific injuries for certain outcomes that are directed to those injuries. So we do our own in-house research. We have a research team, and I'm a research associate within that team. We're small but mighty, about 15 of us, with our director, and we have 3 research associates that all have our PhDs in differing fields. And then we also have a research coordinator, a senior biostatistician, and lots of stats people to help us out, as well as data management, because we do collect a lot of data nationally.
Right.
So yeah, one of our projects, just talking about education, that we fund, and there's a lot more funders going into this, including the Institute, as well as ICORD, the International Collaboration on Repair Discoveries, ONF, the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation, as well as Vancouver Coastal Health fund the SCIRE project. It's called SCIRE, which stands for Spinal Cord Injury Research Evidence.
Okay.
And there's a great website, so I'll send you the link definitely to put that up.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a professional side for clinicians to look for the most up-to-date, evidence-based care that's going on. And so it's a great resource for clinicians as well. They've also launched a consumer portion. So that's a go-to resource for consumers that we totally advocate for going there to find all the up-to-date research as well as care that's going on in the field.
So when you say that you're collecting a lot of data, in general, where do you get that data from?
Yeah, so there's lots of different sources. So here at the Institute, we focus on translational research and best practice implementation. So along kind of the research pathway, just to give you a simplified overview, going from basic research to that's kind of an idea in the lab, or a lot of people refer to it as discovery research, so academic research, and then moving that into clinical research, which is done in humans, like pilot studies, first in human, and extending that to big, broad clinical trials, say, and then going from there and implementing that into medical practice. So you can do that with a technology or, say, a pharmaceutical or something like that. So we focus on this translation of these ideas into clinical practice. So how we collect data, let's say one of our projects is the Rick Hansen Spinal Cord Injury Registry. So this is a Canadian-wide registry of individuals who have sustained a traumatic spinal cord injury.
Right.
So we use data collection forms to gather information and track the care of individuals with traumatic spinal cord injury during their journey from acute to rehab and then into the community. So there's 31 sites across Canada in 15 cities, and we capture over 600 new individuals per year. Currently, there's over 7,000 participants in the registry, just to give you an idea.
Wow.
So that's a big research project going on and continuing. And we are the national, we house the data here at RHI, at our center here.
Are there other organizations that are similar to the Rick Hansen Institute that also are doing what you're doing, or are you guys it?
I would say nationally, we're it. There's a lot of different provincial organizations that are doing great work, and we collaborate with them, definitely. I think our uniqueness is in our network, that we're even beyond national, we're also international, as well as where we fit within that research continuum. There's a lot, I wouldn't say, I mean, maybe some researchers would disagree with me, but there's a federal government funding going into a lot of that basic research and academic research that we think of. And then we're really trying to bridge the gap to fund those great ideas that can make that leap into clinical research. So I think as well as that implementation into medical practice to make things actually care standards. So I would say our uniqueness would be, where we fit within that research cycle, as well as our national and international network.
So there really seems to be kind of like three different phases to an average spinal cord injury, which would be the sort of the initial accident, the rehabilitation, and then transitioning into, say, the community. Of those three phases, are you guys sort of centered on research into all of those phases, or just particular ones?
No, we have research in every single part of that. We call that the care continuum. So looking at the acute phase and even how people are getting to those acute facilities. So the triaging and what happens before. Timing is a big thing of when people are getting to specialized centers, as well as definitely within that acute care in the hospital, say the first 30 days or a month, and then in the rehab. So we're collecting data both at acute centers as well as rehab centers, and then into the community, which is in fact, it's the biggest part of somebody's journey. Who suffers a spinal cord injury is then living in the community. And I would argue there's probably less research looking at what's going on in the community.
So, when you put it like that too, there must be a huge number of data points that you guys look at, far beyond just, okay, well, how many people have had spinal cord injuries, and because, if you're also looking at things like, well, how long did it take the person to get to the hospital? What was the triage like? What was their rehabilitation like? Like, is there like a lot to unpack there?
Yes, definitely. We do, obviously for a lot of the data, we have to consent patients too, to collect. It's a lot of personal information. We also collect some socioeconomic information as well as what interventions are going on, what types of surgeries, complications as well, what happens after as a result of the injury, or maybe not as a result of the injury at times. So there is a lot of data and definitely a lot to unpack. So each site owns their own data. They're their own data stewards. So our network can look into what they want as well within their own data. So you'll have somebody in Toronto or Ottawa having an interesting question that they want to look at within their data, as well as here, say at Vancouver, I've been involved with some spine surgeons here that want to look at their complication levels or their complication stats, say,
right.
And we can help assist them with that, as well as right now to looking at some risk assessment for mortality, say, particularly in the older population. Because surgeons and care providers don't really have that evidence to say what is always going to happen. It's not a direct trajectory for somebody.
Right.
So to have some data to back up some of those conversations, we do some work around that. So, but you're right, there is a lot of data and a lot to make sense of. We do try and produce an annual report on the registry.
Right.
And that gives a lot of high overview stats, I can give you some if you like. Just on right now, I have the current one here from 2017. So what it looks like. So our average age within our registry is 51.2 years old. And that's definitely increasing as time goes on with our aging population in Canada. 76% of the participants were male and 24% were female. So just a little word to that is that in the past, we were only collecting data on traumatic spinal cord injury. So traumatic and non-traumatic are two terms that we use quite frequently in spinal cord injury, and that's really related to the cause of the injury.
Right.
So I think in the general public, what people most commonly think of, like Rick Hansen's injury, a traumatic event, an external force causing an injury, like from a car accident or fall. But there's also non-traumatic, which you can look at as internal forces perhaps causing the injury, such as cancer, infection, spinal degeneration on that spinal cord, the columns causing pinching on the cord.
Right.
So this year we have a new data set that we're collecting, and it's just starting to roll out next month, and we're going to be collecting some non-traumatic data. We're just starting at the rehab site, so we're really excited about that. There's a pilot done in Alberta collecting some non-traumatic data, and we really, we're obviously missing a huge chunk of the population of those that have spinal cord injury. It's just been easiest, I would say, in the past to collect data on individuals suffering from a traumatic spinal cord injury, because a lot of times their admission is similar. They come in through Emerge.
Right.
They're in an acute care facility. Whereas for this non-traumatic, you could be, the main thing is oncology for some people. So that's their entry into the healthcare system. And do you collect data at the oncology units? Like that's a huge can of worms, right? To open to see where else to collect data. So we're just going to start in rehab to see what kind of data we can collect in rehab from people going there. And we already have those sites collecting data for the traumatic, so it's a good fit for the moment.
Yeah, because there are plenty of degenerative spinal diseases out there as well. So that's the number one cause of non-traumatic from what's been published is the degenerative. And once again, with the aging population within Canada and a lot of countries. And also kind of going along with that aging topic is that motor vehicle accidents used to be our number one cause of traumatic, and we're actually seeing falls now eclipsing transport-related injuries. So just in our data last year from the registry, 49% of all our traumatic injuries were caused from falls. Wow.
So it's pretty big, and then transport's 26%. I think I have some numbers to do with aging too in those populations. So the average age for people who experienced a fall is 61 years old. The average age for people who experienced traumatic spinal cord injury from motor vehicle accidents is 45.
Wow.
From sports, the average age is 40, and assault, the average age is 33.
Wow, it's interesting, and again, this goes completely off topic, but I mean, it just makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. That's a large percentage of people who are in motor vehicle related accidents that have spinal cord injuries. So you got to wonder that, damn, if we ever get to a place where we actually do have driverless cars, maybe we can improve that number that way.
Well, hopefully our insurance premiums will go down.
Not likely.
So what about now? Is there research being put into rehab?
Oh yes, definitely. So part of our program, we commonly call them cure and care activities. So rehab obviously falls under both, but yes, within our cure program, one of our priorities is restorative rehab technologies and ways to focus on restoring some function below the level of injury. So we here, also within our research team, we have clinicians and we have a national clinical liaison, and she goes out and does some training as well for the registry and for that neurological classification, to train people how to do the classification. So right now, one exciting project I'm working on is related to activity-based therapy.
Okay.
So just to give you a brief definition, it's referring to any intervention that's targeting the activation of the neuromuscular system below the level of injury, and the goal is to retrain the nervous system to recover. Excuse me. So rehab strategies a lot focus on intensity, how often and how much you have to do that therapy. And with activity-based therapy, it's very frequently and very often. And the idea that we might not be getting to that intensity and frequency within our rehab system here in Canada. So trying to find ways to use activity-based therapy in combination with technologies such as functional electrical stimulation. It's shown to be effective, but once again, it's definitely underutilized in the spinal cord injury population. So we have a bit of money to spend in this field, and we held a national summit. We called it the Activity-Based Therapy Summit. It was a couple weeks ago in Toronto. We brought together almost 40 people, so clinicians, physical therapists, occupational therapists, nurses, researchers in rehab, as well as technologies and consumers. And we're trying to devise a roadmap for some short goals for 1 to 2 and 3 to 5 years, and then longer term goals of 5 years plus within the field. So we really asked questions and did small groups about what people think are ready and appropriate to implement in either acute rehab or in the community, and also trying to look at what actually is going on. So we're doing an environmental scan and a survey of our rehab facilities within our network to see what types of technology and equipment they're using and how they're dosing it, or how often and frequently a patient would actually be using those technologies and what they have. So we're busy right now compiling and analyzing all the information that was shared during that summit to get some working groups going and devise this roadmap, and then that will inform our future funding allocation in the field. So we're really excited about that to get into the activity-based therapy area.
And so the activity-based therapy, it's a fairly new idea.
The main point is the repetitions and how much people are doing. So say for one specific activity, maybe reaching to pick something up.
Right.
How often are people doing that within their therapy sessions? And some evidence is showing that has to be done way more, like hundreds and thousands of times. To be able to show benefit,
right?
As well as getting people up and moving, say on the body weight assisted treadmills, or there's the new exoskeletons.
Yes.
Which are the robotic, right? The external skeleton that can help people move. So those have been coming in mostly in a research capacity. We aren't currently funding anything with an exoskeleton right now, but I think there's some work going on in the UBC research labs downstairs here.
So can we come in and try one?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You should look on to see if they're recruiting.
No, but that is interesting, and I have read some of that, and it's fascinating because not only could that help with rehabilitation, they say that it could also help in terms of injury themselves. They're talking about so people who are doing a lot of, say, lifting or at work, bending, lifting, all that stuff, using these exoskeletons to actually do the labor is gonna take the load off the spine and actually hopefully prevent some degenerative conditions from actually happening.
Injuries, yeah, and I think the technology was coming from which isn't uncommon from a military.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, for soldiers actually in battle carrying a huge amount of equipment and that kind of thing. Also in spinal cord injury, people would refer to an injury as a, acute phase or chronic phase.
Right.
And I think a lot of the hot topics sometimes that get into the media are stem cells and things like that and a lot of that would be occurring in the acute phase, something that a surgeon can give a treatment during surgery or specifically to the spinal cord. And then, but like I said, a lot of the population, they're living in the community with the chronic phase. So people are looking at other things that can help in the chronic phase. So we do definitely have things going on in both. In the chronic phase as well, we're also looking at spinal stimulation, which has been a hot topic. It's made the news a lot in the last couple of years. I don't know if you guys have seen. So basically applying an electrical or magnetic energy to stimulate the spinal cord.
Right.
So what's made the circuits I've seen it on CNN and we see it in a lot of our big science journals, getting somebody to walk again.
Really?
I think that's what usually makes the news, taking some steps or retraining gait. So researchers have been looking at there's invasive methods where you'd actually apply the stimulation to the spinal cord. So it would be an implant.
Right.
And also looking at more non-invasive where the electrodes would be placed over the skin and still stimulate the spinal cord. So yeah, there's been work out of a bunch of different groups. I'd say there's five probably big groups internationally, and they've shown some people starting to walk and improve their walking and their gait. But there are now studies looking at other potential benefits, because I think that's probably the one that makes the news reel, obviously, is getting somebody up and walking again. But what else is going on sometimes with those studies is what scientists like to look at as well. So improvements in other things that have been important for people with spinal cord injury, like cardiovascular improvement, as well as potential for improvement of reducing spasticity, bladder and bowel and sexual health benefits that can come along with that. So I personally think that's going to be the next thing that we're going to be looking at, or we should be looking at, say, with some of those stimulators.
Right.
So we're starting to undertake a project. We're using a survey to look at what people within the community, their thoughts on this technology and where they'd like to see that go in the future, because I'd say the research has mostly been scientist driven up until this point. And we'd like to see how this compares to what people are thinking in the community, which would also allow us to make a more informed decision on where to allocate some of our future resource dollars. So what is the best space for the Rick Hansen Institute to make an impact within this field? So we're going to be having a survey go through. We're hoping we've applied for a partnership with NASCIC, which is the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. And they have a great network of people that they can reach out to. So it's our first time having applied for a partnership with them. So we're really excited, and we hope we can co-create this survey and get some answers from the community to see what's important for people in that chronic phase.
And how big's your team?
Yeah.
you guys have your work
I know, we're about 50. We are busy. We also grant fund, right? So a lot of our funding cycle, so this is my third funding cycle. Personally here at the Institute, I started in 2011. And our biggest funder is the federal government. And last year, this time was a big announcement in the budget that we had our funding extended. So now we're funded for 4 years this next term, and we're just starting. So that's why I'm talking about all these planning and getting consensus and how we should actually spend some of this money that we have. And we're trying to do a good job of it. So we can hit some key topics and some key fields right now. But we do definitely grant fund some projects for sure. We have one coming up. We're hoping to have the launch of this challenge in the spring to early summer of this year. So we're, once again, RHI, we're very into partnerships, and because we aren't that big here within our research team to see where we can expand. So we're partnering with an organization called Mars in Toronto, and they're a Canadian innovation hub.
Right.
So they work with entrepreneurs and investors to launch and grow companies. This might fit in with your interest with the assistive devices and technologies. So they do provide resources and entrepreneur education, hands-on mentorship, and as well as access to things that people might be missing, including capital. So what we're going to do with them is launch kind of, we used to call them like open competitions for grants, say in academia.
Right.
We have a problem we want solved, and we have X number of dollars, and we want people to apply. It's kind of like a request for proposals.
Right.
So we're going to run this through Mars this time and see if we can cast a broader net. So the focus for this will be solutions to quantify and measure interventions for spinal cord injury. It doesn't have to be just focused on spinal cord injury, but that definitely has to be in there. So, it could be an invention that's also could be used for anybody in a wheelchair, right? Not just for spinal cord injury. So looking at things to quantify, maybe something, I don't know, like we usually throw around the idea of, a Fitbit that can give you intensity for somebody in a chair.
Right.
And things like that. So we're definitely hoping to get a wider net through our partnership with Mars, to get people that are not only within the SCI community, but other communities that we can pull in and have a successful challenge and get a product going.
Do you guys work a lot internationally? Like, is there a sort of a tight-knit community between different organizations internationally? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it is a small community, and everybody does know each other. Our CEO does a great job with partnerships, and as well as our team that runs the registry. So like I said, we're a small research department here, but overall, the Institute has 50 employees. So the registry that I mentioned earlier that's in Canada, we've also used that platform for other countries. So New Zealand now has theirs up and running. We have a project going on with China to collect some data at one hospital there, and as well as in Israel. We also have a partnership with Hebrew University right now.
Right.
And that was exciting. They were academic and entrepreneurs there meeting. So first they were trying to identify unmet clinical needs with teams within spinal cord injury around some clinical questions that our clinical team provided. And then they came up with some research ideas to support these to bring certain things to market. So what they came up with was called an iCough, is an assisted device for coughing. And as well as a U-free is what they're calling it, a specialized catheter. So I think they're in the prototyping stages for those and trying to get those up and going. And we also have an upcoming partnership with UBC has a new school of biomedical engineering. So we're trying to get something locally going on too, some sort of challenge, and the same idea,
right,
getting some clinical needs addressed. I think bringing in different people, right, definitely helps with innovation and just thinking outside the box. And yeah, definitely with the assistive technologies, like developing something for maybe an unintended use, and it's worked out brilliantly.
We love it when that happens. It's so great when somebody makes something mainstream and it turns out that it's, an amazing piece of assistive technology.
Yeah. I mean, we look at that too from spinal cord injury from the pharmaceutical perspective too, because spinal cord injury, I mean, luckily it isn't such a huge field that there's not compared to some other disastrous effects, there's not as many people injured with spinal cord injury in Canada. So it works against us sometimes for funding.
Right, sure.
And that, say, a pharmaceutical company isn't going to look at spinal cord injury over stroke or something.
Is there anything else that's sort of going on that's new and exciting for the team right now?
My specific projects are with Cure, but then there's a lot going on in care as well. We're trying to come up with a national spinal cord injury strategy, as well as looking at what's out there for guidelines for people for caring for people with spinal cord injury, as well as getting sites accredited as a specialized center for spinal cord injury. So the Rick Hansen Institute's been very active with that, along with Accreditation Canada, to get our sites accredited. So having specific standards that you have to meet to get accredited. So that's been going on under care. I mentioned the spinal stimulation. We're also on the verge of funding a continuation project on biomarkers and cerebrospinal fluid pressure management. We're funding a particular investigator, Dr. Brian Kwan. So he is located in Vancouver. He has his own lab within UBC, but he's also a spine surgeon with the spine team here. So he's done past projects looking at spinal perfusion pressure, so the pressure that's going on in the spine. So this is an actual acute project. So this would be somebody under the acute phase of care here at VGH. So they're collecting spinal cord fluid from individuals that have been injured, and they're looking at certain biochemicals and their concentrations to see if they can be mapped to better characterize injury compared to those standards that I was talking about before, the neurological standards.
Right.
The classification, because you can't always complete that assessment because somebody has to be conscious to have the full analysis done. So that's a problem, obviously, sometimes with multi-trauma coming in to emergency. So if there could be another way, like collecting a blood sample, or they've started with the spinal cord fluid, if you could collect that and have some sort of biochemical signature for a certain type of injury.
You did talk about, electrical stimulation. What is the research being done on stem cells? That's been in the news for 10, 15 years now. And we touched on it just briefly, but is there a lot of work being done? Is there hope for stem cells?
So in general, we don't have the money to fund big multi-center international clinical trials. We have our stem cell stance on our website, which should actually be updated. But yeah, we're not funding any stem cell trials. There's the big one in the U.S. that I think they had enrolled 4 people, and then it ended up getting shut down because of money. So there is some stuff going on in Europe, I believe, right now, as well as obviously the kind of the international tourism for stem cells, which we don't recommend to anybody, obviously. And we have our stance on that, as well as I think ICORD has a really great resource on that on their website, the International Collaboration on Repair Discoveries, about people traveling to different parts of the world to receive injection of stem cells, which can be dangerous, obviously.
Sure.
Because I don't think there's enough evidence there yet. There hasn't been a successful trial yet to prove that that's our way forward for care. I'm not saying that it's not going to be. My PhD and my basic research background is actually dealing with stem cells and gene regulation. So not with respect to spinal cord injury, but yeah, I'm well aware of that. But so there likely, I think, are still some trials going on right now. There's also a lot of basic research. So we have funded some lab research with respect to stem cells. Some work going on in Toronto. But yeah, nothing right now that we are actively pursuing with our institute.
And is that just because of money, or you just don't see it having immediate results? You're getting better results through the electrical stimulation and other methods?
Yeah, I think both. It's a bit of both, and the money that we have to put forward, where is it going to make the biggest impact?
Right. Sure.
Definitely right now is not for stem cells, and even pharmaceutical, like these big companies can't even hold these trials right now. So for us, we're just a little small drop in the pile for that.
Okay.
But yeah, so for our cure, we're looking more at the neurorestorative rehab that can be done.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's where education really becomes so important, because, it's tough when, the media will pick up on, a few key buzzwords and throw them out there. And so everyone just assumes like, oh, okay, well, stem cells, this is what they're going to do. They're just going to plug stem cells in and it's going to cure everything. And that's definitely not the case.
I know.
So does that ever get frustrating at, somebody who's, you're neck deep in the field, to field questions from dummies like Ryan?
Hey, I'm a lay person who has no knowledge in this field, so that's why I'm asking.
I know. I totally get it, and even from my perspective too. Even if I was thinking of, or I had a family member, I'd be like, where are they even getting those stem cells from? Yeah. Stem cell research is different in different parts of the world because of certain policies. And Canada has some strict policies, particularly about where you're sourcing stem cells from and where those are coming from. And that's important to me as a researcher and ethically for patients.
Right.
I mean, stem cells are exciting. I remember I started my PhD in 2002 when the human genome got sequenced.
Right.
And yeah, it was an exciting time and so much promise, but it really does take time. So we always use the stats that 14% of health-related scientific discoveries enter into medical practice, and that it takes an average of 17 years for them to do that. Wow. So that's pretty shocking when that's what our scientific literature is telling us. So, if we can help within the spinal cord injury field make some of those, say the low-hanging fruit, come to fruition a little bit quicker, then that would be great. But yeah, I think for some of those big, huge things that might be big wins like stem cells, it's going to take more time.
Sure.
Definitely. And I know a lot of people don't have time or people are anxious, and because they have been hearing all this stuff in the media for a long time now. Yeah. So we'll see where that goes. I think definitely in the field for blindness, right, and diabetes, and I think that kind of research is a little further along,
right,
I would say, than stem cells for spinal cord injury right now. But that's not my field of expertise, and neither for the Institute either.
So,
but it's cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess the big takeaway here is just that, there is so much to this field. And it is so complicated, so much data to examine and to collect. And there's so many places where you could put your energies. Do you put your energies into prevention? Do you put your energies into rehab? Do you put your energies into, assistive technology? To help, in the chronic phase, there's so many places for 50 people to work on. You really do. You have to pick your battles, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, just from what I've witnessed too over the years being here at the Institute, is that definitely our funding, we started so broad and we had working groups in all different areas, and gradually, I think in any research field that the money is getting tighter, and there's more competition on that money and what to do with it. And I think us as an institute now, we are definitely way more focused than what we were 12 years ago. And we're definitely going to the community and having conversations and doing, stakeholder meetings to see what we should focus on. And once again, with the focus being impact. So, we didn't even touch on the secondary complications, which is a big part of spinal cord injury care. Going in the community too, right? Like pressure ulcers, which impacts more than just spinal cord injury.
Right.
So we have work going on that, and urinary tract infections and respiratory problems and pain, like you mentioned before too. Pain is such a big issue.
Right. Yes.
For a lot of people in a lot of conditions.
Well, we'll just have to have you back.
Yeah, what are you wasting your time talking to us? You've work to you've work to do.
I know. It's March break too. Jeez.
Well, listen, we want to thank you so much for taking some time out and talking to us. It is really eye opening to really get a bit of an overview of the work that you guys are doing. Is there, where can people find more information about the Institute and what you guys are doing? And is there any programs or anything that you want to plug that people can maybe inquire into?
Yeah, well, definitely. I'll send you a list of links because I noticed on your website that you put links under the podcast. So yeah, definitely our Institute's website, as well as the SCIRE website, the Spinal Cord Injury Research Evidence website. Okay. You can put that up. And then even on our website, we have, which I think we have a great little booklet, our annual booklet on that registry data, which I didn't touch on much of it, but I think a lot of people, especially people with spinal cord injury or people learning about spinal cord injury that might want to know some high-level stats and some nice tables and figures and stuff like that.
Perfect.
So yes, I can definitely send you the link, as well as at rickhanseninstitute.org.
Perfect. Well, yeah, we'll make sure we'll put them in the show notes. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Nancy. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It is really fascinating to get an overview of just how much work that is and how complicated it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, just like you were mentioning, all the data points that you have to gather, right? It's and all those things. If you think about it, like someone is in a car accident. Okay, well, is there? You have to ask the question: Is this time a factor? Like to the moment they're in the accident to when they get triaged, does that factor in what the eventual outcome's injury it is? Yep. They have to collect all this data from all these different incidents to try to see what the trend is, to try to build these. And that's just the intake. Once he's released or he or she's released from the hospital, then it's the whole rehab side of things, right? Yeah. And the activities and what rehab techniques are going to work best for this situation, and the repetitions like she talked about. Yeah. It's so deep.
But the other really surprising thing about it is that they're really one of the only ones in Canada. Mm-hmm. And it really just shows you how important of a guy Rick Hansen is. Mm-hmm. Because without him and without the Rick Hansen Institute, who knows what kind of research would be being plugged into this, if any.
And there's a small team, like she said, 50 people. Yeah. It's incredible. It's incredible to me that organizations like this still have to go to the government and beg for funding. Yeah. I just, right. Same with search and rescuers. I just don't get it. Like, these are kind of essential services. Yeah. And I don't know why we have to go with our hands out or our hat out saying, please give us money.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, nonprofits having to beg for money, and it's such a critical service.
Yeah. And yet there's like 6,000 flavors of Oreos. Like there's all this research being put into developing new flavors of Oreos. Yeah. Let's take some of that Oreo money and let's plug it into the Rick Hansen Institute, people. Exactly. Come on. Yep. No, but they're doing such important and incredible work there. So it was so fun. That was great to talk to them. You seem to be a little bit disappointed that stem cells didn't seem to be the new.
She only mentioned the word stem cell once, and it's been such a buzzword for years. Especially in the like she said, the diabetes and the blindness fields. So I wanted to kind of touch on stem cells because we didn't talk about it. It is a hot topic, and I just wanted to kind of get her take on, are stem cells being used in spinal cord research, and what have the outcomes been? And, she really didn't sound very positive on the stem cell research being done at this point in time. And
and it could be that, stem cells just are integral to say something like blindness, but they might not be as useful in. I mean, it sounded like the
research hasn't been done yet.
There's still research being done out there. It's just not being done by them.
Right.
I think she mentioned somewhere in Europe. Mm-hmm. People are working on it. So, who knows? But I mean, again, it goes back to, the media throws these buzzwords out there and people pick up on them, stem cells. And, I guess, lay people, they just assume that, well, stem cells are going to solve all the problems. They're just going to be able to stick a needle in something, extract some juice.
Well, they reprogram the cells, plug them back in, and away you go.
Yeah, but it's clearly not that easy.
Well, she was saying, what is it, 17 years down the road, research?
Yep. So.
Yeah. Well, and I found it kind of interesting, too, that she was talking about falls are kind of the number one leading cause of spinal injury.
That was a really interesting stat, too. And, this is where
our aging population, right?
This data becomes so important, too, because I never even considered that. But, and I was being, it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but, the driverless car topic that I brought up, that's a legitimate, I think, conversation to have. Is that, if something like driverless cars can reduce the amount of traffic accidents, and if, what did you say, 45% of spinal cord injuries are come as a result of transportation or transportation-related accidents, if we can, really decrease that number, that's going to have a big impact.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I think, self-driving vehicles is going to help society in general,
Yeah, they really need to move on that.
It's not even just injuries. It's just people being responsible.
Just don't put Microsoft in charge of updating the driverless cars. That's all I ask.
Well, there's a new update coming out soon.
I know. And,
Get ready.
It's a bad sign when, not to get off too much into the weeds, but it's the end of the show. We might as well go off into the weeds. But, man, what the hell is going on with Microsoft Update? Like, every time there's a major Microsoft Update, they release it, and then 2 days later, they're like, hey, yeah, that Microsoft Update that we released? Yeah, probably a good idea to not install that because it breaks something else.
Well, the problem is Microsoft has this whole insider program that are reporting bugs or supposedly reporting bugs back to the teams, and Microsoft's still pushing out these updates without fixing these issues. So
they're not doing their job.
No, they're not.
So stop it.
So go into your Windows updates and delay your updates for 30 days just to be safe. Because you don't want it to be automatically pushed to you and find out all of a sudden that you can't get on the network or that it's wiped out your files or
who knows what what the new one will be.
You don't know, but it's coming.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yep.
Hey Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
atbanter.com.
They can also email us, I hear, at cowbell@atbanter.com.
And we have no Steve today, so we're not going to have a cowbell sound.
I know. So
silent cowbell.
Wah wah. Where else can people find us?
They can find us on Facebook, ATBanter, Twitter, AT_banter, Instagram,
ATBanter.
All
one word. All one word. I knew you didn't know our Instagram tag.
Nope, I don't use it.
I thought I would help you.
All right.
But that was pretty good. You knew the different tags. I'm impressed.
No, I sometimes pay attention.
Yeah. What else? That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yep. And your favorite podcast app.
Yeah, we're on everything. Spotify, Stitcher, blah, 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 blah. Just whatever. We're everywhere.
Everywhere. They're everywhere.
All right, everybody. That's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canastech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. or call us toll-free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.